requalification and observation by the Arab countries.
It's not clear at this point which Palestinian prisoners will be freed from Israeli jails, but none of the Nukba terrorists will be set free. And we're also learning that Marwan Barghouti and other terror leaders with blood on their hands won't be released. What are your sources telling you? What do you know about the Palestinian prisoners that could also be freed in the coming days?
Yes, actually, this is not the first time that Hamas calls for the free of Marwan Barghouti. They tried during Gilad Shalit swap in 2011, but Israel refused that. And now Barghouti's wife moved from Ramallah to Egypt to push the negotiators and the mediators to put and to keep her husband's name on the list. I know Israel is rejecting that. But the Palestinians says that they reject that because Marwan Barghouti is a symbol for the Palestinians, and he will reunite Fatah and call for an independent Palestinian state, and the Israeli politicians don't want to have a Palestinian state. So it's not because there is blood on his hand, because Israel also in the past freed Palestinian prisoners with blood on their hands, but this time Marwan Barghouti tried to exclude him because they don't want to have a Palestinian state, because he will lead that and the world could support him, and for political reasons they don't want. But Hamas put his name and another 5 top leaders on the name, including Ahmed Sadat, the head of the BFLB. But it's unclear until this evening when the cabinet meets and will endorse the names of the prisoners who will be freed from the Israeli prisons. So right now it's still early, but everyone is monitoring and hopes that Barghouti will be freed, because he also can the biggest challenge for Abbas and to end the arena. Actually, Hamas wants to be remembered that it had also ended the arena of Abbas by freeing Barghouti, who's a strong competitive, and he could be the next Palestinian president.
We know when it comes to the day after, many questions remain, but according to Donald Trump's 20-point plan, it will all be detailed in the next phase of the deal. What is sentiment like on the streets about the day after in Gaza, what a future there looks like without Hamas at the helm? What can you tell us?
Yeah, now the Palestinians celebrate the stop and the end of the war, the ceasefire, and they allow the entry of humanitarian aids to the hungry people in Gaza. And they know that the second phase is difficult, complicated, and the Trump plan wasn't ideal for both the Palestinians as well as for the Israeli side. But I think the negotiators are serious, as Trump gave instructions to them, is that failure is not an option. And the Turkish are engaged by direct demand from Trump. The Qataris, the Egyptians are pressuring Hamas. Actually, they pressured Hamas to say yes to Trump's proposal, and now they're going into the details. We saw the Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani is there in Al Arish negotiations, and the chief of the intelligence of Turkey as well as the Egyptian put all of their weight and the pressure on Hamas. So I think despite all the difficulties and unclarity of some points in the Trump proposal, but the negotiators can overcome that and reach an agreement, and a stable agreement that will end this 2 years of sufferance for both the Israeli and the Palestinian side.
Mohammed Najib, Palestinian security analyst, live from Ramallah in the West Bank. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And now back to studio, senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran. Many questions remain about exactly what we were talking about now with Mohammed Najib. Who exactly is going to be freed from Palestinian convicted terrorists who are going to be freed from Israeli jails? What are you learning on that front? There are certain red lines for Israel, no doubt about that.
Yeah, these red lines are being imposed. My understanding is that Hamas tried to bring the release of 6 heavy terror leaders, and at least 4 of them were vetoed by Israel. Hamas also wanted the release of Hamas's Nukba fighters who participated in the October 7th attacks. That, to my understanding, also is not going to happen. It is possible that Nukba fighters, this is the Hamas elite ground unit that did not participate in the October 7th attacks and were apprehended inside the Gaza Strip. It is possible that they will be released, but Israel's drawing the line that anyone who orchestrated or participated the October 7th attacks is not going to be released. Now, Osama Hamdan, senior Hamas official, speaking right now to Qatari Al Arabi TV, saying that obviously no hostage will be released until the deal comes into effect, but saying that the main point of this agreement is the complete end to the war. Now, this is, we're seeing Hamas attempting to show this as a victory, saying that what Israel failed to achieve in the battlefield, it was imposed on it through an agreement. Now, publicly or ostensibly, Hamas did stick to its original demands to end the war since the beginning, since day 8 of the war, 9 of the war. They came with the same conditions: complete cessation to the war, full Israeli withdrawal, and only then will there be the release of hostages. But that is not what is happening under this plan. Israel is receiving all the hostages before the withdrawal is completed, before the significant part of it is actually implemented. And the last soldier will not leave, or the last hostage will be released before the last soldier leaves. And this is a significant shift in the reality that was brought forth also by the pressure from Trump, but also what we saw yesterday. All levers of pressure put on Hamas. There was the Qatari mediators, the Egyptian mediators, the Turkish mediators that also joined. This is contributed to the push to get it over the line, not the finish line, but the starting line, because that's where we are right now. But Hamas publicly trying to show this as a victory, when in reality, this deal is a lot more aligned with Israel's demands to end the war rather than Hamas's.
We'll take a deeper look at the varying narratives on exactly that in a very short while. I will come to you both, Relic, and as well, of course, to Yaki for your thoughts on exactly. But I want to now go back again to correspondent Robert Swift. He joins us once again from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. What is the latest there? Rob, what update can you share right now?
That's right. When I was speaking to you a few minutes ago, I mentioned that I'd spoken to Sharon Calderon, whose brother-in-law, Ofer, was released in the last hostage deal. And I found her again so we can quickly speak on camera. Sharon, can you explain to me, how are you feeling today? What's your emotions? What's your reaction?
It's everything. We are very happy. We are very scared. We are worried. And we are full with joy and hope, everything together.
And obviously, for everybody who's been waiting for the hostages release, this is the moment they've been waiting for, almost. But there's also some big question marks left over. What happens with the hostages who are not still living? What happens with the war? Does it continue? What happens with your home? You live in a kibbutz right next to Gaza. Talk me through that.
Well, we really, really hope that on maximum Sunday or Monday, everyone will be here, all the 48, dead or alive. But if not, we are going to be here. We are not going to stop until the last hostages will be here. I'm living in Kibbutz Ufa. Kibbutz Ufa is next to the border. I'm also a survivor of October 7 myself. Ufa is next to the border, 2 kilometers from the border. And I didn't come back home yet. I have the word to stop. We have to stop the war, that I will come back home, because this is impossible to be there. So I want two things. I want all the hostages here, and I want back home.
And how confident are you that that second thing will happen now?
Well, we don't know. We have to wait and see. We just have to hope. This is what we are doing for 2 years, more than 2 years. We're just hoping. Sometimes it's working.
Sharon, toda rabba.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, correspondent Robert Swift. And of course, we will be coming back to Rob. He'll be speaking to various relatives of hostages there in Hostage Square in the coming hours. And as we heard there, that hope has just been keeping so many people going for 2 years now. Brigadier General in the Reserves, Israel Relic Shafir. We were talking just before we went to speak to Rob about the different narratives. Israel very happy with this deal. Hamas trying to paint it for its supporters as a victory of its own. Break it down for us.
Well, in a way, both sides are right. the chips of the Turks and the Qataris were on Hamas, whereas Egypt is holding about 200,000 Muslim Brotherhood members in jail. And through Trump's pressure, they switched allegiance to the Palestinian Authority rather than Hamas. And this is, by the way, one of the reasons why it's a good thing that Barghouti was not released from jail, lest it be accredited to Hamas and not later on to some kind of a Palestinian Authority, which may take place after Mahmoud Abbas. But going back, it's a start that both sides will have to confront reality. Israel will have to confront reality in the sense that we're not going to annex Judea and Samaria, certainly not Gaza. The Palestinians will get to control Gaza one way or another in whatever costume you would like. This will give them the legitimacy to claim some kind of a control in the West Bank through autonomy or whatever arrangements will take place. But because this is a much larger deal of the Middle East, controlled by moderates, Arabs and Israelis, versus Iran and China, which is the big deal here. And Israel will have to play along and forget about the zero-sum game with the Palestinians. This is over. We're going to have to find ways and means to make sure that we have non-conflicting interests together. And this is what the 20 points in the game say about this. For some people, it's going to be hard to swallow. Certainly the ultra-right who are dreaming about some messianic future. But it's also a healing phase for the Israeli society. It will limit the power of the extremities on the right and the left and force a more centrist, realistic group to take control of the government, and that will be part of the healing process.
And that healing process is just so important, Yaki, right now for the entire nation across the political spectrum as well. Your thoughts?
100%. But let me talk about the deal for a minute, because I think it's a great deal for Israel. In theory, we achieved all the goals that we were set for this war. First and foremost, and this is not in theory, the hostages are coming back home. All of them. And this is the most significant moment. The second point is disarming and dismantling Hamas. And this is a process, but this is a conditioned process, and nobody would have thought to get such a deal which is conditioned, and the IDF is still staying in Gaza to make sure that this is happening. So this is a great achievement, I think, and that's going to be a long process. We are still miles away from achieving this goal, but it is with the staying in Gaza. It means that the IDF is still staying in Gaza. And the last point in this deal is that anyhow, until the last day, Israel is keeping a buffer zone. It's keeping a perimeter, which was one of the aims and goals of this war, exactly like in Lebanon and in Syria, keeping a buffer zone and maintaining the right to preempt any attempt to regroup or rearm if it's going to be done by the Hamas. So this is the first point. The second point is that in this deal, Trump laid down the infrastructure, the grounds to continue the Abraham Accords, which is very significant. This is very important, and no doubt that Trump is going to use this momentum in order to expand the Abraham Accords. And here, I think we have to capitalize the military achievements into diplomatic achievements and exactly moving into some kind of normalization process with the Saudis and Indonesia and maybe other countries as well. And by that, minimizing the influence of both the Qataris and the Turks, that Hamas is part of their blood and flesh, and they are and part of their philosophy. So they would like to protect and maintain Hamas, and this is exactly the fight that is going to take place, the next fight that is going to take place in the Middle East, shaping the Middle East. Whether we eliminate Hamas by moving with Saudi Arabia and other moderate countries and using this momentum, or whether we give grounds to Turkey and Qatar entering the zone of influence in the Middle East. And definitely it involves other countries as well, like Lebanon and like Syria. So it's really reshaping the entire Middle East. So just to maybe to summarize, I think it's a great deal for Israel. Nobody would have expected such a deal to happen. But nevertheless, we have still miles to go in order to achieve all the goals that we set to ourselves. So no doubt we can enjoy today, we can be extremely happy, but keep our eyes on the ball and make sure that we are reshaping the Middle East in a way that would benefit Israel.
While you're speaking, we are looking at live images on the screen out of Gaza right now. Senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osirang, you've got updates on developments out of Gaza. We're looking at these images right now. We can hear the horns, we can hear cars. There's some level of celebration. Talk to us about what you're hearing, the reaction inside the Strip as we speak, 2 years into a war started by Hamas on the 7th of October.
Yeah, so last night, as the reports were coming out, the announcements that the sides had reached a ceasefire agreement, I reached out to one of my contacts in Gaza. He's an activist who has been on the run from Hamas over the past couple months. They tried to interrogate him in the Shifa hospital, but he managed to escape. And I asked him, how is he feeling in these moments? And he says, I am uncertain, because there's a big concern that once Hamas releases the hostages, that it will not move towards disarmament and that it will maintain its chokehold over the Gazan people, at least until this committee of technocrats comes into effect. And if we're looking at what Hamas is saying in their statement, very mildly detailed statement yesterday announcing that they reached the agreement. They talked about end to the war, withdrawal of Israeli hostages, the entry of humanitarian aid. No word about ceding control or disarming. Now, these are all issues that are under the deal. Yes, these haven't been agreed upon yet because these are in the latter phases, but there is a lot of concern inside the Gaza Strip that the dynamic that has occurred throughout this war, whenever there was a ceasefire, Hamas took advantage of that lull in the fighting to crack down against dissent, to settle scores with vocal activists, that this is something that is going to happen once more. And as long as Hamas is armed, they will be able to do so. They are the strongest militia inside the Gaza Strip. No committee of technocrats is going to change that. I'm also not sure that the 10, 15,000 Palestinian police that are being trained both in Egypt and in Jordan are going to be able to pose a real contradicting force to that. And until Hamas disarms, they're the ones calling the shots in the Gaza Strip, and many Gazans are concerned over this reality. So again, we're talking about a phase deal. First phase was agreed upon, that is the release of the hostages, but there is still currently no agreement over Hamas relinquishing control, even though, as Yaki described, this is a precondition in the agreement. The whole agreement lies on the foundation that Hamas is no longer going to rule the Gaza Strip. But until that actually happens, until they hand over the weapons, they are still the de facto leaders, and there's a lot that can go wrong and happen inside the Gaza Strip for the civilian population of Gaza, but also with regards to Israel's security.
And these are live images on the screen right now out of Gaza. We're looking at these images coming through right now. Relik, your thoughts on what's happening right now? What are we looking at?
It's a good question whether it's an Israeli bomb or whatever blew up there. I would have thought that they would have want to fire the last missile. Apparently, it didn't happen so far, but we'll find out what had happened.
Wait, but
continuing on what you've just said, within the accords, there's a military force, not just a group of technocrats headed by Tony Blair or whoever it may be.
Tony Blair and others.
Yes. But a local police force that will be bolstered by Palestinians being trained. But I think they will probably be led by Egyptian forces and other pan-Arabic forces. And as I think we mentioned before, that the Egyptians are vehemently anti-Muslim Brotherhood. So they're a real opposition to Hamas. And I think we will see clashes because Hamas may give up its big arms, but they're not going to give away their Kalashnikovs, that's for sure. So there's going to be some either a power struggle or they will be subjected to the pan-Arabic forces and become part of the police, change hats. So this had happened in the world before. So it's not new, and we'll see how that handles over.
And certainly there will be systems in place to watch how that all unfolds.
For sure. Just two quick notes. One, explaining what we're seeing on screen right now, the plume of smoke. The ceasefire is not yet in effect.
Exactly.
It will only come into effect once the Israeli government votes to approve it, and that is going to happen this evening. So
it's 6 o'clock.
Yeah, so there's a current withdrawal, but Israeli forces are continuing with their defensive activities inside the Gaza Strip. The ceasefire has not yet entered effect. That is one point. The other point, with regards to what Relik said, my understanding is that there is opposition on the part of Hamas and even acceptance of this opposition by the PA, that the Palestinian force, they're going to be deployed in the city centers, whereas the international force is going to be on the borders. They don't want that direct interaction between these foreign peacekeepers, stability monitors, call them however you want, but they want to try and avoid the situation of a potential clash. As Relik described, my sense is that they will get that we'll see the Palestinian forces take control in the city centers. But this highlights a much bigger issue that we have not really touched on yet. This deal reintroduces the Palestinian Authority inside the Gaza Strip as the official administrator. Yes, there's this committee of technocrats once removed. You have this international body overseeing or advising. Everyone is trying to influence that. But what this deal does is not only reintroduces the Palestinian Authority into the Gaza Strip, but also, as Yaki described, this even sets the stage for a viable path towards Palestinian statehood. This is the text of the agreement, and that was the original price. We have to remember, this was the original price of the Saudis for normalization with Israel before October 7. We see that it is the same price, and Saudis that I'm speaking with are saying that it was very important for them that the price remains the same, as to not make it appear as if this is a reward to Hamas. Obviously, Hamas, the last thing it wants is a Palestinian state, even though they're saying otherwise because they don't believe that it will actually happen. But if it were to happen, this would be Hamas's nightmare. And the Saudis, they are also not only commending this deal, but sticking to their original price.
I would add one major reservation. I mean, it is conditioned that the Palestinian Authority will go under severe reform. And the reform speaks about incitement and corruption and so many things that the Palestinian Authority is so far away from achieving that. So the question here is, would it be some kind of a deal that it is being mentioned, but it will not be enforced? And actually the Palestinian Authority will remain the same, corrupted, inciting Palestinian Authority, and they will be allowed to take some kind of action there, or whether it's going to be enforced. Because for the time being, the Americans and the Israelis are very much insisting that this item that the Palestinian Authority has to go to a major reform before entering any major role or receiving any major role in Gaza will be achieved. And the second point is, I think that one thing that Trump will do using the momentum of the first phase that has been achieved is that he will do the two things simultaneously. One is working to normalization. He will not wait for the second stage and maybe the third stage to be implemented. He will move right away to achieve the normalization in the Middle East. So you'll see two things in parallel, going in parallel. One is concluding this deal, this ceasefire deal, and at the same time trying to reach some kind of a broader normalization, even before the elections in Israel, that the elections in Israel will take place somewhere in 2026.
With which nations exactly?
So the question, I think really the cherry is Saudi Arabia,
sure,
no doubt, and that would open the door for many other Arab and Muslim countries entering. So this is one thing, and Indonesia will definitely come with Saudi Arabia. That's a sure thing. We heard the speech that the Indonesian president gave in the UN, saying shalom and all kinds of things like that. He's already there, but he would wait for the Saudis, and at the same time trying to reach security deals in the region with the Syrians and also with the Lebanese. And one thing that Israel will try and insist is have the same side deal with the Americans as the one that exists in Lebanon, i.e. that any regrouping of the Hamas will be answered with Israeli fire. So that's something which is not in the current deal that we see, but definitely some kind of a side deal that Israel would try to reach or already reached with the Americans.
This kind of a side deal is going to be a lot more difficult in Gaza than it is in Lebanon.
Sure.
In Lebanon, there is a mutual interest with the Lebanese government that to weaken Hezbollah. Think of the idea that there are Egyptian forces, Qataris, Indonesian forces within Gaza. There is some kind of a Hamas organization, maybe building missiles or something within a certain quarter. Are we going to bomb that while there are Indonesians in the area? Are we going to tell them to show us, to prove to us that they're dismantling it? A lot more difficult than it is in Lebanon. So I would hold my horses. That's one thing. Another one is, who is the teacher that will administer the test of the Palestinian reform? If that teacher giving out the marks is Trump, then he will decide whether they are reformed or not, and not the person who sits in Balfour Street in Jerusalem. These are difficulties that we will meet along the way and conflicts that we'll have to handle.
And certainly will all be ironed out, no doubt, down the line. Right now, the focus remains on what is happening in Sharm el-Sheikh. The delegates are there, an expectation that the signing is going to happen shortly. And then, of course, we know that later on in the day, the Israeli cabinet will be meeting as well. And then that will be ratified, and then kicks in the 72 hours in which all hostages will be returned from terror captivity in Gaza. An historic moment indeed. The nation is waiting. We've been talking about a range of nations across the region that are impacting developments right now. Another one we need to focus on. Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Ankara will closely monitor the strict implementation of the Gaza ceasefire deal and continue to contribute to the process while maintaining efforts to push for a Palestinian state, as we've been discussing. The Turkish president taking to social media to thank President Donald Trump, saying, quote, he had demonstrated the necessary political will to encourage the Israeli government towards the ceasefire, as well as Qatar and Egypt. So for more reaction and insight, we welcome Turkey expert Dr. Chai Eitan Cohen Yanarocek from the Moshe Dayan Center in Tel Aviv University. Thank you so much for your time. An historic moment in the region. We're waiting for the official confirmation out of Sharm el-Sheikh. Many were surprised at the role Turkey was even playing at this 11th hour ahead of this momentous deal. What do you make of the impact Ankara has had on getting Hamas to come on board so far?
Well, I would like to emphasize that this is the direct influence of what we have seen last week in the UN and in the White House. Donald Trump crowned Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, as the ultimate deal maker. And thanks to Erdogan's consent, we do see that the Hamas terrorist organization had no further maneuverability. And also, in retrospect, we can also say that the Israeli bombing in Qatar also played in Trump's hands, right? We all have seen that the Israelis apologized to the Qataris, but at the end, the most important supporters of Hamas, Qatar and Turkey, these two countries, they put an end to Hamas's maneuverability. And as a result, we began to see that Erdogan, as a great friend, of Donald Trump, began to play a very important role. And he also sent his director of the intelligence, Ibrahim Kalin, to the talks. And I'm not surprised at all that the Turkish press is crowning Erdogan as the deal maker, as the peacemaker. And as you also highlighted, that Erdogan is also signaling that his country will play a more active role in the future, that he says that Ankara will monitor the implementation of this agreement, meaning that Ankara will try its best to function as the guarantor state of this agreement.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been spewing so much hateful rhetoric about Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, even recently, and then this clear message that he will maintain these efforts to push for a Palestinian state. How concerning is this for Israel when you're hearing Recep Tayyip Erdogan talking about his future role in this very dynamic and ever-changing region as we speak? History is being made right now.
Well, this is very complicated for the Israeli decision makers. At one hand, we see that the hostile stance of the Turkish president against the state of Israel. But on the other hand, we see that the same Erdogan is considered as a very important and reliable partner of the United States. So this is very much dependent on the, on the rhythm that will be dictated by the U.S. president. If the U.S. president will pave the way of the Turkish president towards greater activity in this process. So obviously we may see further friction between Israel and Turkey, because at the end the Turks will try to play much more an active role, and it seems to me that the Israeli decision makers would do everything possible to limit the Turkish penetration into Gaza and obviously in the entire region. So we'll see what will happen, but it will not be easy for Israel. In my opinion, we will see more and more Turkish penetration in the future.
Donald Trump close to Turkey, Donald Trump close to Qatar. We watch and see how it all unfolds. Dr. Chai Eitan Cohen Yanarocek, thank you as always, live from Tel Aviv.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yaki Dayan, your reaction?
So yes, I mean, Turkey was pivotal in bringing Hamas to agree to this deal, no doubt. I mean, they want to preserve Hamas. This is their interest. And Turkey is a major problem in the region. And I think and you should add to that Erdogan is a good friend of Trump, which adds another layer to this problem. And I think one of the biggest challenges of Israel now is to see how you limit the influence and the involvement of both Turkey and Qatar in any role in the Middle East, whether it's reconstruction of Gaza or in Syria or in Lebanon or in any other place. Those are negative players. And the only way to balance that or to limit this influence is to try and bring as quick as possible Saudi Arabia, because this is really a much more moderate force. It is a force that is closer to Trump, and you can limit by that Erdogan, because Erdogan is trying to fill the vacuum that the Iranians left in the region. And again, if this is going to be successful, and I have many hours of Erdogan's, you heard me before saying that I met Erdogan many times, and his hate to Israel comes not from his head, but from his heart, really. So it's all about interests. Trump did, maybe one more thing, but Trump did the art of the deal here, because he did not pressure or leverage Qatar or Turkey. He promised something to each player. He promised Qatar a defense deal. He promised the Turks the F-35, and the Egyptians were simply terrified from his plan to evacuate the Gazans from Gaza. So all of them had interests and were very instrumental in bringing the Hamas. But now you should see how you limit this influence and stop it here and not expand.
Relic.
In a way, there is a choose your poison type of decision. Who is going to control Gaza? Who are going to be the forces on the ground? How are we going to limit the Turkish influence in Syria? Remember that the change in Syria happened because the Turks had pushed Jolani to take over. So their hands are all over. And in a way, we're better off with the Turks than with the Iranians. So it's a choose your poison. If we
I'm
are
not sure, by the way.
no, because there is leverage, much more leverage in Turkey than there is on Iran by the U.S. So we have to swallow that type of poison and be able to work through common interests and not look for the divider, but for the joiner. And that is something that Kissinger already said many years ago, and let me repeat this. Israel has no external politics, only internal. And that is the vacuum that this particular government had left that brought us the way we are. Let's hope that the next administration in Israel is able to show more latitude to extending and strengthening the outside ties of Israel rather than be belligerent.
Here, it's not Israel to be blamed, by the way. With Turkey, it's strictly Erdogan's feeling and sentiments towards Israel.
Parting thoughts, Ariel Osran.
Yeah, Relik mentioned Iran. I think we need to remember the blind side here, and that is the existing elements that are threatening Israel, where Israel is working to close perhaps the most pressing arena. But we have to remember that there's still the persisting threat of Iran. They are obviously not going to be happy with this war ending, this potentially stopping or stopping the momentum of the further diplomatic isolation of Israel. I think Israeli security establishment needs to be very vigilant as to what Iran, Hezbollah might try to do in the immediate time period. And to my understanding, they are. But obviously, in the wake of October 7th, we mustn't forget the blind side. And that is what is Iran and its proxies, what they are planning right now to try and undermine this festivities and this occasion here in Israel with the positive momentum, horizon moving forward. They're not going to be happy with that reality formulating on the ground.
Israel would need to be vigilant. Those existential threats remain. But for now, the focus will be on this potential breakthrough happening just a short time right now in Sharm el-Sheikh. And in the words of President Isaac Herzog, a morning of historic and momentous news. I want to thank Yaki Dayan, Relik Shafir, and Ariel Osran for being here for the first half of our breaking news coverage. But our coverage will continue in just a few moments, so do stay tuned. This is I-24 News, breaking news edition. I'm Benita Levine. Back in a bit. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Don't go anywhere.
Copper, heat therapy, cold therapy, Theralite warm-up, microcurrent tech, extension handle. This is the ProSage Thermo Copper, the latest percussion massage gun tech advancement available from Evertone. The ProSage Thermo Copper is the only 6-in-1 percussion massage gun with warm-up technology, hot and cold therapy, microcurrent, and now are you ready for this? The benefits of copper. Get deep muscle warm-up technology and a professional athlete-level massage for full body recovery and relief. Back in 2018, Evertone's invention of the ProSage created the craze in the market for advanced professional-level percussion massage. Featured on The Talk, Entertainment Tonight, CNN, and others, the ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 is a powerful percussion massager with our patented Theralite warm-up technology, advanced copper head therapy with unique copper benefits, our proprietary heat therapy head for deep muscle penetration, and the cold therapy head for soreness and inflammation. Microcurrent tech for pain recovery and restoration, and it even comes with our newest extension handle, so you can reach anywhere on your body. This makes the cordless ProSage Thermo Copper 6-in-1 with 5 unique massage heads the most advanced professional-level massage gun available. The gold standard in massage guns is now the ProSage Thermo Copper with targeted pain relief.
This is I-24 News. I'm Benita Levine. Breaking news edition live in Tel Aviv. History unfolding in front of our eyes. Just over 2 years since the darkest day in the history of Israel. In just a few moments' time, the war will officially be over. The first phase of the deal is being signed and sealed in Sharm el-Sheikh right now. We will bring you details as it becomes official. The agonizing wait is almost over for the families of 48 hostages. They're coming home. 20 living hostages should be reunited with their loved ones in the coming days after surviving 2 years in the terror tunnels of Gaza. President Donald Trump calling this a great day for the world, announcing overnight that Israel and Hamas have signed off on the first phase of his plan to secure the release of all hostages and end the war, a war started by Hamas on the 7th of October. Overnight, he clarified on social media that all of the hostages will be released very soon and Israel will withdraw its troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable and everlasting peace. So for the latest, let's go back once again to correspondent Robert Swift. He joins us from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And of course, that's the venue in the heart of the city of Tel Aviv, where there have been so many rallies and so many ceremonies and so many events over the past 2 years calling for the return of all the hostages. And now, Rob, it seems imminent. The nation holding its breath. What are people there saying? What can you tell us?
That's right. And all those events over the last 2 years, many of them have been here filming, and I haven't seen this exact atmosphere at any point. You know, there have been times when there's been rallies here, when there's been bigger crowds, but there hasn't been a crowd like this at this time in the morning with this level of excitement that I've seen previously. Now, there's a lot of excitement. There's music playing. There's flags waving. People are hugging each other. Random people are hugging each other. Just a minute ago, I overheard an Israeli mother who was explaining to her 2 kids that this what's happening around us is a historical event, she was saying to her kids. And it's clear that a lot of people are feeling that way. There's a strong level of anticipation, of excitement. Of course, people understand that the finishing line has not been crossed. There's a lot of hope, but people are also apprehensive. But for the most part, there's just good vibes here. People have been waiting for this moment for 2 years, and it does appear like it is finally almost arrived.
It's palpable, but still nerves, no doubt about it, as we wait for the official confirmation. Correspondent Robert Swift, live from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for that update. Now, the families of the hostages in terror captivity have been waiting for this very moment for more than 2 years now. The hostages believed to be alive in Gaza include Ariel Cuneo, 27, Alon Ohel, 23, Eitan Horn, 38, Avinatan Or, 31, Elkanah Bochbot, 35, Eviatar David, 24, twin brothers Ziv Berman and Gali Berman, 27, David Cuneo, 34, Eitan Mor, 24, Maxim Herkin, 36, Omri Miran, 47, Bar Kuperstein, 23, Guy Gilboa Dalal, 23, Nimrod Cohen, 20, Matan Zangalka, 25, Matan Angres, 22, Segev Kalfon, 27, Ron Braslavsky, 21, Yosef Chaim Ohana, 24. Now, Israel has expressed concern over the health of 2 of the living hostages, Tamir Nimrodi, 20, and Bipin Joshi, 24. So important to know those names. It feels like we know all their families, and the waiting continues. And so now it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Adi Rotem, former senior member of the Israeli National Negotiation Team, senior correspondent Owen Alterman, and correspondent and host Eli Hochenberg. Thank you all for being here at this historic moment. And it really feels like for the first time in 2 years, Adi, it's safe to smile. It feels like this good news is just imminent. And given how you have been involved in this process, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I gotta say, it's a mix of, a very emotional day, very happy day. We've been waiting, as you said, for 2 years and even a bit more, for this news, good news. And it was so challenging all the way. We knew, of course, what's going on with the families. They suffered so much. So it's very exciting, very emotional. As you said, we're waiting to see them, in Israel, but it's going to happen, we're pretty sure. And I think this is an enormous achievement by President Trump, that he, put all the efforts and at the right time, timing is everything, especially in negotiation. So as one, who was on those rooms, of negotiation, I can say, and I'm sure for the team that is right now, Shem Sharm el-Sheikh, that they are very, it's an emotional day for them too. And we really want to see the last one of them. And as you mentioned, there are 2 that we don't know up to now what's the situation. And I gotta say, also the bodies. We're really careful about getting the bodies. We know what happened with Hadar Goldin, which is, we're looking from Tzuk Eitan, 2014, so many years that we didn't get a body back. So Israel will have to also make sure that we get all the bodies, even though it's going to be challenging, and maybe Hamas will want to play a bit with this kind of issue. But as I said, emotional day, very exciting. And we're looking forward to see the hostages back home.
And in this respect, may I jump in, Benita? What an emotional day to be here with you. And speaking to what Mr. Rotem just mentioned about the bodies of the hostages, we're not summarizing anything yet. It ain't over till it's over. But if we've learned anything about the Israeli spirit and about this fight altogether, it's not a fight about this or that hostage for this or that family. It's a fight over Israeli values and what makes those values so crucial for the Israeli being as a nation and as a country. And in this respect, I think that we can see a very clear graph of learning by the man who deserves all the credit, U.S. President Donald Trump. At the very beginning, he did not fully understand why those Israelis are talking about those who are alive and those who are dead. The same sentence. Those are alive. Those aren't. It's not the same. It took some time. He genuinely did not understand that, this mental capacity. Israel was able to explain that this is a part of its values, not to leave anyone behind, alive or dead. And this is part of the success of what we're seeing today, of a country that seeks life, but also seeks to fight for its core values of what makes it what it is.
So that the families of those whose loved ones were murdered in captivity or on the 7th of October and whose bodies were taken into Gaza get to have a dignified and appropriate burial at home. I get goosebumps as I'm talking about exactly that. And Owen, you've been covering this war throughout as well. You know the international pressure that brought the world to be watching this moment right now. Bring us up to speed on who put pressure on which parties to get a situation in Sharm el-Sheikh as we speak, where signatures are about to be put to a deal that ends this war and sees all hostages coming home.
Well, I think there was such a level of exhaustion abroad with the war, and of course here in Israel as well, as we've talked about, let alone in Gaza, that at some point, I think these leaders saw an interest in themselves as being seen as the ones to end it. Whether that be Donald Trump, whether that be the leadership in Qatar or in Turkey, who stepped into this over the last week or so, and it's interesting to understand why. And again, because there was so much opposition to this war and so much anger directed mostly at Israel, rightly or wrongly, but anger directed at the situation, that for leaders to be able to be the ones to come in and put an end to this and being seen as putting an end to this, I think once they understood that this was in their interest, and especially in the case of Qatar and Turkey, that they could also get a stake in the day after in Gaza by being such an important part of getting this to the finish line, that I think is what tipped the scales. And of course, Donald Trump, going back to what you both said about him, if nothing else, Donald Trump understands how to generate and how to use leverage. And that's exactly what he did here. And by the way, the attack in Fordo and his decision to send those now famous B-2 bombers that he loves to talk about so much to Fordo was important, we now know, beyond the attack itself. Because I think without that action, I don't know that Hamas or its sponsors here in the Middle East would have taken Trump seriously when he talked about giving Israel a green light to go further in Gaza if the deal weren't accepted. But because of that decision to take on risk in launching that attack in Iran and showing that he was willing to use force, Donald Trump then had a credible threat. He generated that leverage and was able to use it.
Adi, given your thoughts and your role in the negotiations, were you surprised at the role Qatar ended up playing in the end and the role Turkey has ended up playing right now as we speak?
Well, not that surprised, I got to say. And, in some way we can see how failure on one hand, turned into successful on the other hand, which, of course, I'm talking about the failure of attack of leadership of Hamas in Qatar and what eventually made out of it by President Trump. But those two countries, as Owen said, by the way, they has their own interest, big interest within Hamas. Should I remind, each one of them hosts leadership of Hamas in their country, Qatar and Turkey. They're both countries, Muslim Brotherhood countries. This is Arab country, this is Turkish country, but they see in a similar way, the way that they see Hamas. By the way, they want to see Hamas still on his legs on the day after. So they've got some interest, different interests. So Israel will have to think, what does she want for the day after? When we're facing the next phase of negotiation, and maybe I'm jumping because we want to see the hostages first, as I said, but Israel should decide. Should she give, as Owen said, Qatar and Turkey a place in the day after in Gaza when those two countries see Israel in a very negative way and are like enemies of Israel? We can't even, color it in different colors. So Israel will have to decide what does she want for the day after. But as I said, each one of them has its own agenda. They wanted to please Trump. Qatar wanted this defense, collaboration with the U.S. after the attack, the failure attack. And Turkey wanted the F-35 and other interests. So they wanted to please Trump. And that's why they had a big role for this phase. We have to calculate our steps for steps ahead.
But isn't it a bit too late now? The train left the station to an extent when it comes to the Qatari and Turkish involvement in the day after?
It seems that way given Donald Trump's posture here.
Yeah.
It seems that way. But I do think that the rise of Qatar and Turkey does open up an opportunity with Saudi Arabia. My sense also from discussions in the last few months, it's not that the Saudis are against normalization with Israel, but they're less interested in it. They're less compelled to do it. They're less incentivized to do it now than they were.
They're less in need to do it.
Exactly. Less in need than they were 2 years ago. They're stronger economically. They're much stronger in Washington. Their liberal brand is stronger. The things that were pushing them and incentivizing them to go for normalization in the months before October 7th aren't there now to the same degree. But the rise of Turkey and Qatar and their rising influence in the region just over the last month and the rising influence in Washington, one would imagine that's sending shivers up people's spines in Riyadh, including to Mohammed bin Salman. And maybe they now would be more incentivized to move and take a step toward normalization to try to counter that. One also final thought about the negotiation, not final thought, but one thought about the negotiation. We talked about what's changed, but there's one very interesting thing that actually stayed the same and is staying the same over the course of the 2 years, and that is trying to square the circle between one side that is demanding an end to the war in return for the hostages, Hamas, and one side that is refusing to give that promise on the Israeli side. And it was always a big challenge for Witkoff and for the negotiators, for that matter, for the Qataris, to try to find a way to square that circle. And that problem never really changed. And that's still here with us with phase two, right?
Yeah.
Because we now have this not necessarily by design, but by evolution, this situation where both sides have a different set of expectations going into phase two, which is why they're both one of the reasons why they're both signing up to phase one. But that square was circled in the talks where you have the hostages coming back with one side believing it's getting the end of the war and saying it's getting the end of the war. I think it's getting guarantees for the end of the war, and the other side saying not necessarily so.
Well, also interesting that both sides get to, in effect, say that they, in terms of their support, have some kind of victory. And both guys get to say to their supporters, look, we've done well, we can accept this deal.
Yeah, I think, the negotiators can say it. Hamas, of course, I said in, different place, even if we'll left 3 Gazans and 1 truck, they will have their victory, triumph. So I'm not getting excited about what they will say, because Gaza is pretty much ruined. I think they lost a lot. By the way, if Sinwar, I guess, would have saw what he caused, for Gaza, this wasn't his plan. He succeeded on October 7th way too much, and I think this is what led, to what we see today. But yeah, each side will want to say that he has a victory, but I think for Israel, it's a really amazing achievement. When we get all the hostages, even before discussing this very tough argument, there are going to be discussions going to be about the day after, so it's an enormous achievement to get all of them. It wasn't before. Even the Witkoff proposal at the beginning of this year talked about it in stages which were very different. So to see all the hostages before we even discuss, I think this is enormous.
It's just a few weeks ago we were talking about a potential partial deal, and right now we are waiting for ink on the paper to confirm that all hostages will be coming home soon. Please stay with us. We've got much more to discuss as we ask the question, how do the families of the hostages in captivity feel right now? Well, one can only imagine. Take a listen to this call between some of the relatives of hostages in Washington speaking with Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick on the phone to President Donald Trump overnight. Take a listen.
They want to say something. Is that right? All right, hold on. President Trump, you have the best crowd in the world. What do you guys have to say to President Trump?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. You did it.
Wow. You did it.
Wow.
Thank you.
This is amazing. Mr. President, we believe in you.
We know you've done so much for us over the past, since you became a president, and even before that. And we trust you'll fulfill the mission until every hostage, every 48 of the hostages are home. Thank you so much. Blessed be the peacemakers.
God bless you, Mr. President. God bless America.
Thank you very much. You just take care of yourselves. The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
All
You heard it again. The hostages all coming home. Goosebumps again. So now, let's go live to Washington. We cross to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. What a moment, Mike. He sealed the deal. Donald Trump securing an agreement many believed wouldn't happen. It sees all hostages coming home as the first part of phase one of the deal. Tell us more. What's going down in D.C.?
Well, one of the best sleepless nights we've had around here in a long, long time with all the excitement being generated here by this deal. Donald Trump will depart for the region. It's not defined yet exactly when that will take place. We understand it will be on Saturday, though we're not quite sure whether it will be, what time of day. There is some talk he may even depart as early as Friday evening. Now, the plan, as we understand it, is to travel to Israel to attend a ceremony on the tarmac at Ben Gurion Airport upon arrival and to address the Israeli Knesset, the parliament there, on Sunday at the invitation of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's our understanding that Trump won't stay on the ground there in Israel more than a day, although if the hostage release is delayed until Monday, he might remain in Israel until Monday in order not to oversee the release, but at least to be on the ground, possibly to welcome the hostages coming back over the border, which would certainly be a captivating moment for the world and for Trump himself. So that's the broad plan as we understand it right now, but things are still in flux and the White House has yet to confirm the details. But certainly across the political spectrum, we have yet to find anybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, across the political spectrum who was criticized this deal in any way. There's been some notable abstentions, so to speak, those who haven't chimed in as of yet, especially those on the hard left of the political spectrum and the hard right for that matter. But at least everybody within any broad definition of the mainstream who has weighed in so far has had nothing but positive things to say about this deal that has been struck and the effects that it will have both in the short and long term for Israel and for the region and for the United States for that matter.
Bring us up to speed a little bit on getting to this moment. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner arriving in Sharm el-Sheikh overnight. But it didn't really take long before we saw that image of Marco Rubio passing that note to Donald Trump during that briefing, saying he would be needing to make an announcement. Now, he could be here at Israel soon, addressing the parliament in the coming days. As you say, it all seems to be wrapping up pretty rapidly. What are you learning?
Well, this was set in motion by this peace plan that was presented by Trump during Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit last Monday. Let's rewind just a bit. If you'll recall, the day before the peace plan was delivered or was announced, there were still negotiations ongoing between Netanyahu and Trump's team. And there were some tweaks to that plan that, because of time constraints, I think some of the Arab leaders didn't have time to challenge. And I think Trump smartly set it up that way, or else you just drag out the whole process forever like it's been done. But there was a little bit of a concern within the Arab world that those changes might impact Hamas's ability to accept the plan. But this is where Trump differed from his predecessor, Joe Biden. Biden could lean on Netanyahu to a certain extent, but he didn't have the wherewithal. He didn't have the cachet to lean on Hamas. There was nobody there he could really pressure. The Qataris to some extent, but the Qataris could push back, and they did. Trump was able to build those relationships with key Arab players that Biden largely shunned on human rights grounds and other grounds. Trump built those relationships, often, behind criticism, with the Qataris, with Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, with the Saudis. He was able to utilize those relationships at a key moment to get those leaders who have, some of them, the Qataris, the Turks, have been harboring Hamas leaders, lean on them at just the right moment so that the pressure was essentially equal, so that nobody could really have an opening to walk away from the deal. I think by the time, this is taking nothing away from Witkoff and Kushner, by the time they were able to get to Sharm el-Sheikh, it seemed like the vast amount of the groundwork had already been laid. Of course, the devil is always in the details. But once you send Witkoff and Kushner and the relationships they have with Trump, everybody in the room knew that they were speaking directly for Donald Trump, that they didn't need to go back and forth for approval, that what they said had the backing of the American president. And I think that made all the difference in the world. Nobody really had, at that point, the ability to push back in any substantial way.
The art of the deal, indeed. One step closer to that Nobel Peace Prize. Tell us more.
Well, you know, everybody is calling for it at this point in time. This is something that Trump has been, I wouldn't say obsessed with, but very much focused on. This, you know, going back to the Barack Obama days, where Obama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for what many felt was not, you know, a very strong resume. And Trump has said, listen, I've solved 8 conflicts in 8 months now. To some extent, he certainly has. And it's time. There's no reason at this point to deny him the Nobel Peace Prize. So we're seeing many calls for this, especially, by the way, from Israelis who say that there was nobody else that could get this done the way that Trump did. And they're right. And people have tried for many years to get this done. I think the Nobel Committee, as much as their political leanings might say otherwise, would be hard-pressed at this point not to give Trump the prize. Who else could they put out there who's had a bigger impact in such a short amount of time in bringing conflicts to a resolution? And I'm sure Trump now can turn his attention more to the Ukraine-Russia conflict and try to at least bring that to some resolution as well.
Certainly sounds very well deserved if it does, in fact, happen. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, live from Washington. Thank you, as always. A massive day. Much more to come from Mike, of course, in the coming hours. Adi Rotem, former senior member of the Israeli National Negotiating Team, when you hear this kind of insight, when you hear the role that Donald Trump and his envoys have played just in the lead up to this potentially momentous moment just minutes away, your sense of the magnitude of this moment and specifically the pressure out of the US president?
Yeah, you know, I think that when you face such a complicated conflict like Israel has with Hamas, you need to have someone like Trump, which is, you know, people like to sometimes mock and laugh about the way that he treated, the way that he handled this kind of conflicts. But you got to have sometimes the craziest guy in the room in order to solve something which is so complicated. As, you know, your guy mentioned, with Biden administration, it was very different. It was very different. It was very difficult because you got to put effective pressure. What Trump did, and as I said, he took the failure attack in Qatar, the Israeli failure attack, and he took it to something, to gain something out of it. And when you put all those leaders in his room, the Arab and the Muslim leaders, and made sure that everybody understand what exactly he wants, that he wants to end it, and he wants to have all the hostages at the beginning, which for Israeli eyes and ears, it sounded something very, you know, dreamy. So I think that this is kind of people that you need to bring something different to the table. And as your guy also said, you know, comparing even to what Obama got is the Nobel Prize, it's nothing like what Donald Trump did. And I'm pretty sure, by the way, that he won't let the second phase, which we will face, you know, very soon, he won't let it, you know, fail. Because he put a lot of his credibility about this process. So I think we're going to see also the next phases very soon and hopefully successful as well.
Before that next phase, there's still the question of which Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails are going to be freed. And we know that it's not going to be Marwan Barghouti. There are other terror leaders with Israeli blood on their hands who are also not going to be freed. But the question still remains about the so-called price. Israel clearly will pay the price, happy to do so, to get all the hostages back. But that is a huge question looming over the nation as we speak.
There is a fundamental difference between price and value. And I think that this ordeal is teaching us this lesson, but not less important, if you will, Benita, as a technicalities, because we initially thought that by midday, as in noon Israel time, which was almost an hour and a half ago, then the 72 hours will be triggered. But now we understand it differently. Only later on in the day, in the afternoon, the Israeli cabinet will convene, followed by Israeli government to ratify the agreement. Then 24 hours in which all of this will be open for reservations at the Supreme Court. Only then officially getting the Israeli kosher stamp, if you will. And then those 72 hours will begin, meaning that release of the hostages might not be as early as this coming Saturday, but rather Sunday or Monday.
We wait for that official ratification, hopefully later on, and then the counting will start. Owen, your sense in terms of the question, and it's a huge question, it's not for the first phase, but it remains and it has loomed large throughout this war, and that is the day after. A solution that is palatable for Israelis still wounded by October 7th, still grieving, still mourning, and still at this juncture waiting for hostages to come back home. What is your sense of the Israeli sentiment on the plan, this 20-point plan, what it means for Israel looking at this transitional plan and the powers that will play a huge role down the line inside Gaza after this war ends?
First, a word about public opinion and then the day after. Polls are very consistent, including polls from our sister Hebrew channel. The public supports the deal. The public supports the deal deep into the Israeli right, although, again, at that cabinet meeting and especially at the government meeting later today, we will hear opposition to the deal, maybe voting against it, maybe abstaining.
Finance Minister Smotrich already said he's going to vote
from the Religious Zionism Party. We haven't yet heard, if I'm not mistaken, from Itamar Ben-Gvir and how he feels, but there is opposition to this, Benita, because of this issue of the prisoners being freed and the fear, the well-grounded fear.
A legitimate point of criticism, and we've learned what happens when criticism is not heard, right? So it's a good thing that is being voiced.
Right. So there's a strong support, but not necessarily a full consensus. But as Ellie said, I agree 100%. It's healthy to have this kind of dissent. And we do know from past deals, especially the Gilad Shalit deal in 2011, that these deals do free prisoners who go on to become terrorists, including committing the crimes of October 7th and masterminding them. So there is that. As for the day after, look, Hamas is taking here a calculated gamble, albeit a gamble maybe under the pressure of the Turks and the Qataris, but a gamble nonetheless. The gamble is they don't need the hostages to have leverage over the situation because Israel has lost legitimacy to continue conducting the war, both internally because of public opinion here and externally once the hostages are freed. What will Israel be able to say, Netanyahu to say to his own public and abroad about reasons for going back and continuing to attack once the hostages are free? It's not a rhetorical question because there are things he can say, Benita. There are things he can say, but Hamas is betting that he won't win that argument and that therefore they will have a real hand in shaping the day after. And the Turks and the Qataris will be back and Israelis will be unhappy and left sour about it, giving a political opening to people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. On the Israeli side, I think Netanyahu is probably thinking that, yes, it's true that there is this broad sense internationally of wanting the war to be over, including in Donald Trump's mind, but that Israel is experienced, and Netanyahu in particular is experienced at working and operating in situations like this and gradually changing those norms, changing the conditions, laying the groundwork for being able to conduct a military activity and explaining why he needs to do that. And even if that's not true, sitting here on October 9th, that it could be true on November 9th or December 9th, let alone January 9th or into 2027. So Netanyahu may be betting on the fact that later on in the medium term, he will have the option to go back and fight should Israel need to. So there's these different expectations about the day after. That's what's opening the day for the agreement. But yes, it's a real scenario that Israelis will be left sour from the day after, that it won't be a fundamental change in Gaza, and that this won't be the decisive victory the country wanted. Although the hostages will come home, a lot of damage will have been done to Hamas, and we may even see the normalization agreements on the other side.
Adi, given your role in negotiations in the past, how do teams get to the point that they can agree on which Palestinian prisoners with blood on their hands get to live another day as a free person? How does it happen? Give us an idea of the sensitivity and the harsh realities when making decisions like that.
Yeah,
it can affect the region forever. We know this.
Yeah, of course. So the Israeli team, and especially this is the Shin Bet, most of the work, they know, of course, all the prisoners and all their background. Now, what the Israeli team usually does in this kind of cases, and we did it, and of course for this deal, we really rank those prisoners in matter of the dangerous. Okay, like we try to predict what kind of danger we will face if we will release this guy or the other. And at the same time, we try to see symbolize. Okay, like for example, as we know, Marwan Barghouti, for example, is a symbol in the eyes of the Palestinian public. So we try to see what kind of prisoners we think that it will be okay, relatively okay, of course, we don't want to release anybody, but relatively it will be okay, and it won't be that much of danger, okay, for the day after. So this is kind of a list that we are willing to free because we know that we, of course, we have to pay in order to get our hostages. And there are other lists that we put, and we say these are red limits. For example, as I said, Marwan Barghouti, maybe Abbas Said, and also, other prisoners, which we really know that they can bring some new power, new energy to Hamas or other organization. And we have the third list, which we know that we can compromise and to get into the negotiation, to get some things in return for other benefits. So we know how to play with this kind of prisoners. And as you mentioned, there's a procedure that people can apply to the court, even though, I can say in this kind of deals.
It will be rejected, but
yeah, exactly.
Even an activist judiciary like Israel's, this is the heart of what an executive branch does, decides on war and peace. But it's important to give the victims of terror attacks that these people perpetrated, people who have their own relatives murdered in terror attacks, to give them that chance to have their day in court. It's an extremely important part. And by the way, also just to finish thought, under Israeli law, the reason this has to go to the cabinet and the government is under Israeli law, the release of Palestinian prisoners has to come only through a government.
Yeah, but I can say it won't be a deal breaker. And another thing just to put on the table, for example, we know prisoners that should be released in a few years. For example, Ahmad Saadat, which is like on the red list, but he's going to be released in anyway in few years. So this is also some parameter that the Israeli team take in mind in order to understand this is maybe we can have some, compromising.
But to an extent, maybe it's an outreach here. But similarly to the fact that speaking about rebuilding the border fence is ludicrous if we're seeking new reality, because if we are to build a new fence, it means that we are still living in a reality of compromised security. In the same manner-ish, those prisoners, those terrorists that are being released as part of this deal, if we are to circle back to the reality, the security reality we were before October 7th, then yes, it is extremely dangerous. But if we are to seek a fundamental change here in the region, with the involvement of local Arab powers, with New Horizon, not just for Israel, but for the region altogether, then the release might be inferior to the opportunities that will be seized.
Owen, your thoughts?
Look, the reality is this is potentially going to be something that will revisit us in years to come, as some of these prisoners that were forced to release go on to commit terror attacks and become leaders in the organization. But this isn't the core argument on this day here in Israel. The core argument still is about whether it would be correct to end the war in return for the hostages, and or whether it would be correct to end the war under conditions of the day after that will not be optimal, as we talked about later. This issue of freeing the prisoners is something that was understood from day one to be a condition of the deal. It's part, for better or worse, of the Israeli tradition, as Eli spoke to earlier. For better or worse, it's part of the way the Israeli public likes to see itself. People take great pride in this, that they're willing to make collective sacrifice on behalf of individual hostages. And so this is just something that is widely understood is going to happen, save for a few people, including those politicians who will either abstain or vote against this later on today in those cabinet and government meetings, and a few gadflies in social media who will come in and really focus on this issue. But for better or worse, as Eli said, this is seen as a small part of a much bigger puzzle where other pieces are more important.
Is it a deal breaker if Hamas and other terror groups claim that they cannot find the bodies of all the murdered hostages? Is that a deal breaker?
I don't think it will be a deal breaker for the phase one. I think Israel, we want to see it after and say, if you don't find them, we can have progress in other parameters of the deal. And that should be, for sure, the right, way to handle this kind of thing. It will happen. I mean, I'm pretty sure that even if they have objective problems, and they have objective problems, they will put on the top of it their willingness to keep the bodies, because they know it can be something that can use for the day after. But Israel, I think this time will treat it differently. And this is, like Ali said, I think this is fundamental change in the state of mind of the Israeli way that we see Gaza, we see all the arenas. As we did the switch with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, so we're going to face differently, we're going to treat differently Gaza, West Bank, etc.
And just a quick note in this respect, because there is a mechanism to address this issue, and this is perhaps part of the importance of multiple players getting into this attempt to end the situation. A group led by Israeli forces, but that will include international forces, will be in charge of assisting or searching for the remains of those who are not in the immediate finding. Well, let's put it that way. So there's already a mechanism intact. Our guy Israel from our sister Hebrew channel reported on this group that is already working together, again, spearheaded by Israeli intelligence and using international forces underground to help in the pursuit of the remains of all the hostages.
Heartbreaking and gut-wrenching at the same time. Stay with us. We've got much more to discuss as we turn to the psychological impact of war, the PTSD, the trauma, and the healing. We welcome Vered Atzmon Mushulam, medical psychologist and expert in trauma, grief, and traumatic growth, and the head of the Resilience Division at Zaka. Thank you so much for joining us on this historic day. A collective sigh of relief in the country, tears of joy, scenes of jubilation after 2 years. The hostages are coming home, all of them, we're hoping. Before we get to the psyche of the country, let's start with the hostages themselves. We know the medical fraternity has treated many hostages in the past 2 years, but those coming back now have endured unimaginable conditions for 2 years. How do you even prepare in such an extraordinary situation like this?
Yeah, so first of all, nice to see you again. And in these circumstances that we are now in a very miraculous day that it's going to happen, they are going to come back. So for your questions, for the hostages, this is both a miraculous and a fragile moment. They are under 2 years of unimaginable physical and psychological conditions and torture. There's no real way to prepare for this kind of thing, but what professionals can do is to create a protective, respectable environment, one that gives them time and privacy and the emotional space to slowly rebuild their sense of safety and control and to get back to their life in a really long period, after a long period of time that they are being in captivity in such a rough conditions. And what I can share as an expert, that their healing will take time. Each person's pace is unique. And what matters most now is surrounding them with care and not with expectations, and just allowing them to bring their dignity and humanity. And I think that we are all in Israel are waiting for this moment, like it's the most amazing day for our life now. And we are going to get them back and just, hug them and be united to bring them back to their life and to heal.
No doubt about that. Waiting for this good news. And of course, Vered, the families of the hostages, they've been fighting tirelessly for 2 years now, waiting and hoping, all the uncertainty, all the pain. What kind of insights can you share about their own unimaginable emotional journey and their road ahead?
Yeah, I think that the families have lived through 2 years of nightmare, of uncertainty, fear, and hope, and fighting tirelessly for their loved ones. Many experienced what we call frozen grief. It's like a state where a trauma is ongoing without closure, without the nervous system on constant alert, like you don't know what's going to be happening. So I think that this moment is a very precious and important moment for starting their process of healing from what they've been through. And some of them will start their grief process. And this is the other side that is very, very sad for lots of us are feeling happiness together with lots of sadness. The release of their loved ones is a profound emotional turning point for them and for all of us. but it doesn't erase the pain. You know, it opens the door to a new complex emotional journey, reconnecting after years of separation, processing imminence, accumulate stress, and adjusting to changes in their loved ones and to get to know them again. You know, many things must have been changed, and they need a lot of support. They need patience. They need gentle space for healing, and they need us, all of us, all the nation and all the world, to be with them, to protect them, and to let them feel very secure now when they are coming back.
And the nation will be united in its support. Talking of the nation, 2 years of war, threats on several fronts, rockets from Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Yemen. Some sense of light at the end of the tunnel now, but still so much mourning, grieving, as you say, and healing ahead together as a nation.
Definitely. I think that there is one thing that we are all united here in Israel, and it's the coming back of the hostages. You know that in the Hebrew, in the Jewish tradition, there is a quote that says that we are all one soul. And once we say that, until they are not going to come back, we can't be whole again. And I think that this is the part that will unite everyone, because every one of us feel in his heart the pain and the happiness for them coming back. But after 2 years of war, like you said, it's not the end. It's just the beginning of a national emotional reconstruction. Healing a collective trauma requires more than security. It needs so much more. It needs acknowledgements, shared rituals, time together, and above all, unity. And this is what we are all praying for now.
And Israel has faced wars before, it's survived before, it has resilience, it has faith, it has strength, and it will definitely rise again. Vered Atzmon Meshulam, as always, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate you being part of this breaking news edition.
Thank you. Thank you.
Incredible work indeed. And correspondent and host, Eli Hachenberg. Personally, I believe there's no one better placed to speak to this very point. You were covering the massacre as it unfolded on the 7th of October. How difficult that was, how gut-wrenching that was, facing evil and broadcasting as you reported on it. And now, 2 years later, your sense of where the nation can move forward as we wait out of Sharm el-Sheikh to get this official confirmation that the end of this war is just around the corner?
We're not the story here. We had the duty and the privilege to cover every single day in this nightmare we've been living through in the past 2 years, but also utter privilege to be part of the rebuilding of this nation, of witnessing the strength, the resilience, the spirit of this people and this nation in a pursuit for better future, not just for Israel, not just for Israeli people, but truly the entire region and the entire world. I think that we've been crying so many tears of horror and sadness and profound grief, and to be able to start crying carefully, tears of happiness, yes, with all the sorrow, not forgetting anything that we've been through, but tears of happiness that at least this is now over and we can start looking at the future with a clean slate, so to speak, as much as possible. Again, acknowledging all the strength that we've seen emerging through those dark, dark times, and let the sun shine in. I think that this day is the beginning of it. Perhaps just to be able to allow the joy and happiness to take over, because when horror takes over, we know how complete it is, leaving no room for anything else. So when we have the opportunity to be happy, let's allow ourselves to be happy.
And just how important it is to keep on telling those stories. There were so many people on the 7th of October who came in direct contact with pure evil. And it's 2 years later. And Adi Rotem, as we're speaking and as we're feeling, and there is so much pain and so much hope at the same time, we're getting an update from our colleague from the Hebrew channel, Amichai Stein, to say it appears that the hostages will be freed on Monday. And so the nation, as we were talking about earlier on in the broadcast, together can wait, and together can wait for those moments to see those images again of mothers hugging their children, of fathers hugging their children, and of families being reunited, as difficult as it will be this time round. It is a message of hope.
Yeah, I think message of hope. And, you know, we had a slogan throughout the years, everybody who tweeted and was involved in negotiation throughout the years, even before October 7th, which the slogan said, the Israeli state will do it all, regarding to the efforts of locating, you know, missing in actions or soldiers that we lost throughout the years, the most famous Ron Arad attempts, for example. So we know that the Israeli state is really doing everything. She does everything, literally. And by the way, our colleagues, because we used to work with a lot of colleagues all over the world, they had a lot of admiration, like admiring the Israeli efforts and the ethos of really seeking, no matter where, over the globe. And I think, you know, something happened through those 2 years from October 7th that a bit cracked this solid slogan that we felt before. So I think this is time to recover, you know, that we're getting back our brothers and getting back, hopefully, all the bodies as well. We have to complete the mission, not forgetting it after the celebration that we'll see Monday, and going back to the roots of the Israeli society, you know, for the values, what we are so different from other countries, not forgetting it, to rebuild our nation once again and to heal the society, because, yeah, we're a really wounded society.
And of course, Monday will be a poignant date for the return. If that's what materializes, Benita, it'll be just before the onset of the Simchat Torah holiday.
And of course,
we all remember
the Hebrew date. That is the Hebrew date, 2 years exactly since October 7th on the Hebrew calendar.
Exactly. And Jews will go to the synagogues that night and dance with the Torah scrolls. This is the tradition and has been the tradition for thousands of years. This time, not only with the heavy hearts of knowing what happened on that date 2 years ago, and it weighs on congregations that do this because they know what happened 2 years ago on that morning. But now it will be, in a sense, redeemed by the feeling, if it happens, especially if it happens on Monday, but even if it happens the day before, that the hostages were brought home and that the wound has been healed and that the society stood up for itself and was, in this sense, a beacon to people around the world, as you mentioned.
Waiting and hoping, and understanding that this isn't just about this part of the region, but across the region right now, all eyes on what is happening in Sharm el-Sheikh. We're waiting for the official confirmation of the securing of the first phase of this deal. And right now we go live to Bahrain and we welcome Ahmed Kuzwai, a political consultant from Kuzwai Associates. Thank you so much for your time. An historic moment, an end to the war, all the hostages coming home. From your perspective, your vantage point, your assessment of this historic moment in the region.
First of all, I think we've been waiting at least 2 years for this day to happen and to rejoice. This is a nightmare that's waiting to be over. It's hard to believe that this is reaching an end. I'm one of the people that is still highly skeptical that it's possible to happen, but I really want to be wrong, and I want to see it happening, and I want to see an end to this nightmare myself.
Certainly, the end of this nightmare is something everybody in this part of the world is waiting for with bated breath. We've been talking here in studio about the day after. Much has been made about this 20-point plan by Donald Trump. He's saying overnight on social media that Gaza will be a safer place, that other countries will help it reconstruct because they have, his words, tremendous amounts of wealth and they want to see that happen. What do you understand that to mean exactly?
First of all, And frankly speaking, I don't think anybody wants to see Gaza a safe place more than the Israelis. After all that happened, after October 7th itself, Israel is more keen to see that happen. As for the rebuilding, as for it happening overnight, nothing in this world happened overnight, especially when it comes to this part of the world, to the Middle East, and to this particular conflict. It will take some time, of course, but seeing that Qatar is part of the team, and Qatar is one of the donors, especially coming from Gulf state, historically, it has been one of the main donors, along with Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and even the United Arab Emirates. The rebuild will happen after getting some guarantees, of course, that such things should not happen. And everybody here in the Middle East especially don't want to see 7th of October replicating in any way, and basically prosperity for all people.
And when you look specifically at the Abraham Accords and the suggestion that more nations could want to normalize with Israel and do so potentially soon, what do you make of that?
We have to identify the word soon and be particular about that. It's not easy. Yes, of course, prior to October 7th, there were countries that were expected to join. There were countries that started to broadcast, and people started talking across the media. And here, for example, we're talking about Saudi Arabia in particular. We can't say that it will happen tomorrow, because even prior to October 7th, it was a far-fetched option that some people were hopeful that it would happen fast. But I was part of the people who were saying that it will take some time because Saudi Arabia functions differently, yet they were really looking into it. It will be harder after October 7th, of course, but it's not possible. Actually, this will be the new beginning of a new Middle East that we have to really be careful on how do we nurture it and how do we take it from there.
A new beginning to a new Middle East. We wait to see how it all unfolds. Always appreciate your insights. Thank you so much. Live from Bahrain, Ahmed Kuzwai, thank you. Adi Rotem, we don't have much time left in the show, and I'm going to pose a very difficult question, but you've been involved in negotiation efforts. How do you de-radicalize Gaza?
Wow. A huge question. I think this is something that got to be discussed, in so many parameters. It starts with the education system. By the way, also in the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority, it got to start with education systems. And that's why I think it's got to be built, from bottom up and up bottom. It's got to be built from two ways. This is structure that through the negotiation, we got to deal and discuss it with the Americans, with the Egyptians, with all the players in the region, Emirates, Saudi Arabians, in order to explain and make sure that they will understand if we want to have any chance for peace in the future, it's got to start with different education system. Of course, make sure that Gaza has no more, threat opposed to Israel. This is, of course, a shifting that we had, fundamental shifting in our state of mind. But this is something that will take a long process. We got to be in the details to make sure that we want to build something different. Otherwise, we'll face it maybe not in 1 or 2 years, but not too long, and we're going to face another challenge.
Your thoughts, Owen, on exactly that?
I think you probably don't de-radicalize Gaza. That's the bitter truth. I was always skeptical when Netanyahu would say, Benita, in the opening months of the war, that this was going to be a process like denazification in Germany or what happened in post-war Japan. I just suspect that the nature of the society in Gaza, the entrenched hostility to Israel based on people's lived experience and also ideology, I think it's going to be very hard to reverse. But on the other hand, there are positive examples of the Middle East in the recent past of de-radicalization in the education systems, in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE. Maybe, just maybe, if those countries take the lead in Gaza, put the money in and are committed enough, maybe there can be long-term change. Maybe the most realistic best-case scenario, Benita, is Hamas won't be in full control. There will be more space for public debate in Gaza. And at least those people who have dissenting opinions won't be afraid to voice them in the public sphere. And maybe that will get people to think and a kind of widening of the debate there, and we'll get some different opinions. Maybe that's the best we can hope for.
in 30 seconds, how optimistic are you,
Well,
Eli
quote
Hochenberg?
Bialik, that will say it all. It's not the rags atop of the mast that keeps the ship going. It's the wind. And if the story is about anything, it's about the Israeli spirit. So this
And may they be winds of peace. And may they happen very, very soon. Eli Hochenberg, Adi Rotem, Owen Alterman, thank you all so much for being here for this breaking news edition. And that is a wrap for this coverage, this show for now. I'm Benita Levine, live in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned. Coming up in the coming hours, Eli Hochenberg will have all the latest breaking news. So make sure you stay tuned to I-24 News Breaking News Edition. We're waiting and we're hoping for good news across the region. Thank you for watching.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly